Well, welcome to Noel's World of Whiskey. And you can tell by the way I'm dressed, it must be cold. Yeah, it's winter. In fact, it's Christmas. And what are we going to present at Christmas? Now, I thought, I'm not doing a whiskey of the year. I have no interest in doing that. I thought, could I do a Christmas whiskey? And then I got thinking, or maybe I should look at a distillery that kind of reminds me of winter. And if I was looking or maybe thinking of any distilleries that remind me of winter, maybe I'd think about distillery here in Canada, where we do have pretty long winters. In fact, Two Brewers up in Whitehorse probably has the longest winter of any distillery, single malt distillery. But the years when I was up in Whitehorse, they didn't have a distillery there. And until I go visit Two Brewers, I would probably be better off with the distillery that I've actually visited. And this distillery that I'm going to do the presentation on, I have visited. And of course, it's in Scotland. And it is considered the coldest place in Scotland. So where can that be? Well, the two highest elevation distilleries in Scotland are Breville and this distillery here, Dalwhinnie. And Dalwhinnie is considered the coldest place in Scotland. We traveled up from Edinburgh into the Highlands, and we had some distilleries that we had set up tours on the way, and so we had kind of a schedule. And when we got to Pitlochry, we did Blair Athol. We were hoping on doing Edredor, but it was closed. And of course, Aberfeld, we got a chance to see it, and that was it. But we did spend some time in Pitlochry, very pretty little community, and had a bite to eat there. And then we headed to Dalwhinnie. And we get into this barren open landscape as we're heading north, and the temperature drops. And by the time we got to Dalwhinnie, it was gray, it was cooler, and there was something quite unique about it. You look up into the treeless hills, and it felt remote, like this is the Highlands, you're out in a place where, why did they build a distillery here? That's always a good question about Dalwhinnie. And there is an answer. But it's also, if you looked at it probably right now, if you looked at pictures of it right now, you would see probably a lot of snow. Now the regular Dalwhinnie is the 15-year-old. This is the Distillers Edition. What's the difference? This is finished in Oloroso. The Distillers Edition is basically aged in your American bourbon barrels. So the main difference is this is then again finished in Oloroso. Okay, let's open up this bad boy here. The barcode is 88076188823. And that is the only identification to find out what year this was bottled, because there's no other information on the box or the bottle. And we're going to give it the official pop. Are you ready? Oh, that was a good one. I like that one. Let's pour a dram here. And I'm going to bring the bottle up, let you take a look at it, and then we'll take a look at the glass. So that is the Distillers Edition. So not super dark, not like an Edredor Caledonian or some of the more sherry bombed whiskeys, but you can see the legs. what we're going to do is I'm going to give you a presentation. If you don't want to watch the presentation, just scroll ahead to the start of the review, okay? We'll see you when you get back. After hanging out and exploring the fascinating historic city of Edinburgh for 5 days, it was hard to leave. But it was time to head north and see the rest of Scotland, and of course the distilleries we'd already booked for tours. We headed west past Falkirk Distillery and the Kelpies and checked out the rebuilding of the iconic Rosebank Distillery, and then headed north to Stirling. We were too early for a dram at the Deeston Distillery, so we headed past Stirling Castle and the Tullibardine Distillery, and then we were headed through to the ancient capital of Scotland, Perth, and the historic Scone Palace. It was time to head an hour north to Pitlochry for our scheduled tour of Blair Athol Distillery. After the tour and of course a couple drams, we were all hungry and ready for the delicious and filling meal at Victoria's. After a relaxing meal at Victoria's, we were back on the road, and 8 miles to the north we could see the striking white-colored structure of the historic Blair Castle. After Blair Athol, the topography drastically changed into a barren and remote landscape of the Highlands. We were headed to Dalwhinnie Distillery when I noticed the railway had been running next to us. In 1897, Dalwhinnie Distillery was built to take advantage of the newly completed Highland Railway. Dalwhinnie is the coldest distillery in Scotland and shares the distinction with Breville Distillery as being the highest. With this cold climate, Dalwhinnie matures their whiskey for 15 years before bottling. The colder warehouses also reduce the amount of alcohol loss in the cask during maturation. From 1991 to 95, Dalwhinnie's owner Diageo spent £3.2 million on refurbishment to the distillery, and also added a new visitor center which gets over 55,000 visits per year. Dalwhinnie's water source comes from the snowmelt of the high-elevation lake Lochanu, the Green Loch. The whiskey making starts with the ancient indestructible Bobby grinding mill, where the grounded malt grist is fed into a 7.3-ton stainless steel full-loader mash tun. 60,000 liters of water at 80 degrees centigrade are added to the 7.5 tons of malt grist, which last 8 hours per cycle. This sugary wort is then fed into 6 34,000-liter Siberian larch washbacks. Yeast is added to start the 60 to 120 hours of fermentation. 18,000 liters of beer at 8% ABV are now transferred from the washbacks to the wash still. The low wines distilled from the wash still are at 23% ABV and are sent through the worm tub condensers to the spirit still. The second distillation also passes through the worm tub and ends up at the spirit safe. The undesirable heads are between 70 to 80% ABV and will be reused with the low alcohol feints during the next distillation. The important heart of the whiskey, which is between 55 and 69% ABV, is diluted with water to bring it down to 64% ABV before being poured into the casks. After maturing for 15 years in 250-liter ex-bourbon hogsheads, the Angel share gets around 25%. There are over 8,000 ex-bourbon casks and sherry butts stored on site in one dunnage and 2 additional racked warehouses. Dalwhinnie had changed to shell and tube condensers in 1986, but their spirit was deemed to be not as good, so they switched back to worm tubs in 1995. During the winter months, the worm tubs run colder and have less copper contact with the spirit. This is when Dalwhinnie produces a heavier, spicy spirit called Winter Gold. The Dalwhinnie 15 spends all of its life in ex-bourbon casks, whereas the Distillers Edition 15 is finished in recharged sherry season casks. There are numerous other bottlings at the distillery that I've sampled, including a cask strength presentation that you can bottle yourself. Well, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and we are going to get right into this. The nose. Right off the bat, I got some root beer. Some honey mixed in there. Getting a little bit of, good Lord, I'd say star fruit maybe. You know, we're getting the orange, maybe a little bit of lemon oil. And it's got, you know, some cloves. Slight bit of sulfur I can smell. Okay, let's get into the palate. Slàinte Mhath. I'm actually tasting a wee bit of either the casks are the char of the cask, or it is smoke. It's one or the other. But there is the citrus notes, which I think I mentioned with the nose there, the honey as well, with wee bit of maybe licorice or. I sort of, when I smell the aniseed, I'm always tasting a little bit of licorice here. But you know, as far as the sherry influence, I'm getting a wee bit of grape, little bit of chocolate, but not the real dark chocolates you get from, you know, heavy sherried whiskeys. It's a lighter chocolate. Yeah, and the funny thing is, it's almost fading away right now, so I think I'm going to have to move on to the development and the finish here. So, Slàinte Mhath. I'm getting more of a typical bourbon finished whiskey right now, because the honey and the vanilla notes and the citrus are more dominant. There is a little bit of cinnamon mixed in with the orange. Again, it's fading. It's fading fast, and I can keep rambling on, but there's nothing to ramble about because it's more memory. I'm not tasting it. We'll put it this way, the finish is going to be short. Okay, so I'm afraid to add water, but we have to. Okay, it's 43%. It's not a heavy drink. It's got a bit of a watery mouthfeel, so let's not drown it. Okay, see if this can open it up a little bit. The nose. It does kind of amplify the nose a bit, so something good came out of this. But I'm getting a lot of honey, citrus notes, maybe a little bit of grape. The chocolate is there, the cinnamon's there. The palate with water. Slàinte Mhath. Sweet, more honey, more of the cinnamon, but light on, almost like a cinnamon butter toast. I think the root beer just came back a bit. You know, the funny thing is that this whiskey is something you could sip on, and obviously you wouldn't get too analytic about it. You can see where I am at right now. Almost stuck for words, because it's a simple whiskey. It doesn't have an identity like an Edredor, or let's say a Mortlach, a Loch Lomond, or a Craigellachie. It's actually kind of neutral, and that's how I'm going to describe it. An easy sipper, not a long finish, not super complex. Certainly not something that has a character that I'm going to remember. I'm going to remember this as an easy sipper. That's going to be it. So where would I put this score-wise? This is going to be in the low 80s, 82, 83-ish, I think, is where I would put it. So I just happen to have an older Distillers Edition. And it's back when they actually had the the distillery bottling date and the distilling date. You can read on the box that it was distilled in 1998 and bottled in 2015, which makes it 17 years old. Now I'm going to bring the two of them up, and I'm going to let you take a look at them. You tell me which one you think is darker. I find the one on the left just a slight bit darker. Now the one on the left just seems a slight bit darker, and also just seems to have a little bit fatter legs, or is that my imagination? I don't know. So this guy here, 15 years in bourbon cask, and then of course probably 6 months in seasoned sherry. And this guy here is supposed to be 16 years in bourbon, then a year in seasoned sherry, sherry butts, I believe. So now it's different. So definitely this is a different whiskey than that. And I am actually getting, I would say, darker chocolate notes, maybe some allspice. Got more intense, much more intense nose. Yeah, and this is it is a lighter nose. This is more citrusy. It's not bad, but it's got more of a citrusy, honey, maybe a slight bit of vanilla. Okay, palate of the 17. Yeah, definitely. There's a little bit more here. You've got the chocolate notes, something peppery about it. It's got a slight bit more snap to it, that's for sure. Slàinte Mhath. Much lighter. I've got a lot less to describe. Honey, citrus, and you know, I mean, just to say vanilla, honey, and citrus, I feel like I'm not being fair, but there's not a lot more going on here. Anyways, clear the palate. Let's take a look at this other one again here. Slàinte Mhath. So I'm going to say that, you know, you've got the chocolate, even a bit of coffee stuff going on here. We've got some sweetness, but a lot of spicy stuff going on. Definitely a more intense whiskey than the 2022-2023 version of the Distillers Edition. So, you know, I can almost predict what's going to happen here, but we'll go through the motions. So, Slàinte Mhath. We're getting less intensity, less character, less cask finishing influence. So that sherry cask influence is a lot less here than it is here. Yeah, if I had a choice, certainly I'd like to have another one of these. Anyways, we'll leave it at that. So, that's my review, and that is my comparison of the past and the present with Diageo and their Dalwhinnie Distillers Edition. So, on that note, I'm going to ask you to drink wisely, drink intelligently, and do not drink and drive. And until the next time, Slàinte Mhath.